Hello and welcome to another episode of 52 Weeks, 52 Scientists. Today we have Carl Sagan. Fun fact, he is the third scientist from the United States and the first ever to have a color photo taken to feature on our show. He's known as the Starman, born on November 9th, 1934 to two people. His father was named Samuel Sagan and was from Kamyanka Podilsky in Ukraine, and his mother, Rachel Molly Gruber, was a housewife from New York. The family lived in a modest apartment, and he was born into an ethnically Jewish family. They were Reformed Jews. His mother was very liberal, while his mother was very religious, while his father was very liberal when it came to religion. He visited the World's Fair, which put a start to his curiosity in science. He was an astronomer, of course. He had did study on science. He is the planetary scientist and pioneered this field for many to come. He was an astrophysicist discussing the physics in space and an astrobiologist. An astrobiologist is basically a person who searches for extraterrestrial life from the perspective of biology. He was also an author with many books to his name, as well as the most famous science communicator, arguably. People like Neil deGrasse Tyson, Stephen Hawking, Bill Nye the Science Guy are all in this field, but at a time, Carl Sagan was unbeatably famous, the most famous scientist of all time, and this was just 30 years after Einstein died. He demonstrated how amino acids can come from basic chemicals by radiation. So, let's talk about the product. What are amino acids? So, these are organic compounds and they contain two things. One of them is amino and the other is carboxylate or CO2. These are functional groups along with the side chain which is specific to each amino acid. The elements present in every amino acid are carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. And inside molecules, you can also find in the side chain sulfur. And he showed how you can produce this from basic chemicals by putting radiation. Now, the process of radiation is actually very complicated, and radiation is something Rosalind Franklin studied about. If you'd be interested in watching something about it, I've got a video up here in the iCard. Alright, but his main work was with the Pioneer Plague, which I can't show you because YouTube will absolutely demonetize me. Let's just say there are some iffy things on that thing. And also the Voyager record. These two are objects that are supposed to be found by extraterrestrial life, and these are supposed to be simple enough that people can understand it. The first contains some symbols, the other is a sound record which is with many people from around the world, including random people and politicians speaking. There's a really good video about this by J.J. McCullough, and I'll link to it in the iCard. You could see it. It will be somewhere around the top right side of the screen. But basically, these were the two things that he sent to space along with NASA as a message to extraterrestrial life. He also accepted the basic doctrine. And now this doctrine was that Venus was heated up. You see the cute little graphic there of Venus? Well, yes, that Venus was heated up due to the greenhouse effect. He also testified in front of the United States Congress that the greenhouse effect will affect the Earth's climate system. Quoting C-SPAN, he clearly said this. There will be also a link to this, but I'll play a very short excerpt of this.
Good morning, gentlemen and women, and welcome to what is probably the
individual methane sources are to which by accident we have been born.
This is Dr. Sagan.
Solution to these problems requires a perspective that
Okay, that's how much I'm going to play due to copyright issues. Let's move on now. Let's talk about where he was educated. So he worked. If he was educated in the University of Chicago because he was 16 when he entered college. So he had the grades to enter so many big colleges. Nobody would accept him because he was not even 18 yet. He then got himself a teaching job at Harvard, where his tenure was rejected due to a group of very jealous scientists, and so he went to Cornell. At Cornell, he was the David Duncan Professor of Astronomy and Space Sciences. This was his biggest position, and this is what he did. He lectured on astronomy, and he believed in teaching. He viewed teaching as an integral part of science and the betterment of human society. His books include Dragons of Eden, Pale Blue Dot, Broca's Brain, Cosmos, and Contact. Contact is his only novel, for which he received the Locus Award in 1986 for Best First Novel. Also to note, he received a $2 million advance, which was the biggest for an unwritten fiction book like ever. He won a Pulitzer for his book Dragons of Eden, and he won a Hugo Award for Cosmos. That is pretty commendable. And his articles are now all in the Library of Congress. Basically, he's officially a legend when it comes to being an author. He wrote or edited more than 20 books, 600 scientific papers and articles. As I said, his work was mainly as a promoter of science. His contributions to science as a scientist are unmatched, and so are his contributions as a science communicator. His most famous task, though, was the PBS show and everybody loves, Cosmos, A Personal Voyage, the worldwide most watched show, and the most watched show in the US on PBS before Civil War, of all things, took its record with special use of visual effects and some of his trademark happenings. This was a 13-part series aired over one autumn and became the main course of his career. This just changed his career to make him a science celebrity. Science celebrities is a phenomenon that happened only because of radio, television, internet, etc. And Carl Sagan can be said to be the biggest. Another celebrity, Neil deGrasse Tyson, actually did a continuation to this in 2014 with Cosmos Possible Worlds. He promoted skeptical scientific inquiry. Now, what is skeptical scientific inquiry? I hear you. Scientific skepticism, rational skepticism, or skeptical inquiry is where one questions the veracity of claims. If there's not empirical evidence, if you didn't use the scientific method and bring me evidence, you'll have to ask a number of questions, which is what scientific skepticism is. Here, claims and theories that appear to be beyond mainstream science are examined rather than routine discussions and challenges. Like, if you're talking about normal things, not the mainstream of, not anything apart from the mainstream of science, it will be discussions, challenges, etc. However, the examination of claims and theories that are beyond the mainstream are clearly part of scientific skepticism. This is mostly against pseudoscience and superstitions, right? And he was a big supporter and part of SETI. What is SETI, you ask? The search for extraterrestrial life. In short, he was part of one of the people who were doing research so they could find, do aliens exist? Does an intelligent species exist? And if they exist, how do they function? And more about it. This field is also known as exobiology, where beyond the earth, finding biological evidence is involved. Search for extraterrestrial life still lives on. However, many opposed the search for extraterrestrial life or intelligence at this time due to paranoia that it will not leave enough money for the Cold War. Anyways, he was a big proponent, and his book Contact is all about SETI, basically. He received the NASA Distinguished Public Service Medal and the National Academy of Sciences Public Service Medal, which is now the Public Welfare Medal. And these, okay, so I want to tell you a little bit of story. The National Academy of Sciences gave him this award, but because he had so many rivals, because he was more of a science communicator than a scientist, as I said, many people did not like this behavior, and that's why Carl Sagan, perhaps the most famous scientist of the 80s, during the 80s, never was admitted to the National Academy of Sciences. I can name a few pseudoscientists who were. He received the NASA Distinguished Public Service Medal. Do you know he once leaked a plan to kind of nuke the moon? This was the project A119, which was never actually undertaken, but he was part of it just as a teenager. I had top secret clearance to NASA. Anyway, on the 20th of December 1996, he died in Seattle, Washington. He was suffering from myelodysplasia and he died of pneumonia. He married thrice and had 5 children. He married Liane Margulis, Linda Salzman. They had children including Jeremy Dorian and Nick Sagan. Carl Sagan then married author Andrew Yan, and they had Alexandra, aka Sasha Sagan, and Samuel Sagan Jr. Carl and Druin remained married until his death in 1996. So that was all about Carl Sagan. Next week we have the first scientist who is actually alive on the channel. Can you guess her name? I can give you a hint. It's something related to animals. Meet you in the next one.